So we've got our equation to start this off. And I'm going to write it over here. H of t is equal to negative 16t squared plus 8t plus 8. Now in this equation, over here I'll make notes of what we're looking at. H of t is the height we are above the water. T is the time we spend in the air. So as time goes on, this equation is going to kick out a number that's decreasing until it gets down to 0, which is the point where we've plunged into the water. And as time continues, we are now under the water. Now, what's kind of interesting with parabolas, or quadratics, is that the path we follow as a projectile, the actual path the guy flies in, fits a quadratic curve, and the distance from the ground fits a quadratic curve. Quadratics define all free fall. Anything involving ballistics, projectile motion, cannons, all that stuff from physics is defined using these equations. It's one of the reasons why it's so important we get it right. So what can I do with this equation, which really has two variables right now? I need to get rid of one of those two from the information in the story. If I want the time it takes to reach the water, what can I substitute up into this equation?
Can you ask the question again?
Sure. Remember, h is the height above the water. T is the time that has passed. And I want to find the time it takes to reach the water.
You put 8 in it.
Don't put 8 in.
Nice.
8 is part of the equation. I'm not asking where I am after 8 seconds. I'm asking how many seconds until I reach the water. What height am I at once I've reached the water?
0.
Height 0.
Oh, you plug in.
So I can plug 0 in for the height. Maddie? Rule 4. Now, that's where this gets kind of tricky. There are a couple of big ideas that we need to start getting straight. When we talk about hitting the ground, reaching the water, slamming into something, generally, that's going to be the h. The y part of the equation is 0. So file that away. Picture our guy over here as he's going down, and he hits the water there. That's height 0. His height is some number over here, and then it's 0 down there. It actually happens to be 8 feet up.
It is 8 feet?
Yeah, I know it's 8 feet up because I know from the equation that represents how high he starts at. That's me from my physics knowledge. Our goal is to find out what the time t has to be so that h has gone down to 0 now. So let's go ahead and do this.
I think your trajectory is off. I don't think he jumps like that.
Well, we'll find out.
He jumps where his feet are, he just jumps straight out and he's gonna fall.
Whatever. Can I factor anything out of these three terms to make it easier? Noting that my leading coefficient is a negative.
1.
Factor out a negative 1 to make it positive.
It's not purpose though.
What else can I factor out to make this easier to work with?
2.
Factor out 4. Better, even bigger than that.
You can factor out 8.
Factor out an 8.
Why don't you factor out 16 and divide it?
Because 16 does not divide evenly into 8 or to 8. If you factor it out, it has to divide evenly into all three terms. So it has to be the biggest number that goes into 16, 8, and 8.
But if you factor 8, it doesn't equally whatever into 16.
Sure it does. It goes in twice. Oh, yeah. Misprint. Thank you for catching that.
Stop tapping my freaking pencil on the table.
There we go.
Just can't stop.
Sorry, those are going to be negatives, which makes those still negative t and negative 1. Ladies? Thanks. So now I have to ask myself, actually I'm not going to write that 0 yet. Come back to that. I have to go ahead and factor what's in those parentheses because we're solving by factoring. So we have to get those down so that I have a series of products that equal 0.
Wait, what are you dividing by?
I divided everybody by 8 because that's what's outside now.
No, you put the second one down.
Divided by negative 1. to make that leading coefficient positive.
16 divided by -1.
Negative 16 divided by -1 becomes positive 16. Positive 8 divided by -1 becomes negative 8. And positive 8 becomes negative 8.
Okay.
When you factor out that leading coefficient of -1, it makes the leading coefficient in the equation now positive.
So how'd you get -8 on the outside?
The next step down was to divide out that 8 from 16, 8, and 8, which is why it's now on the outside of the parentheses. I factored it out. I factored 8 out of all three of those terms, leaving me 2, 1, and 1.
So 16 divided
16 divided by 8 should give you 2. Now the next thing to do is to take this and look at the parenthesis combinations. What numbers multiply to -1 and, well, that's easy. That's 1 and 1. 2t, well, that's going to be 2t squared is 2t and t. It's just a matter now of making sure my negatives are in the right spot. I think 2t, t, plus 1 and minus 1. So that's t minus 2t is negative t. That checks out. This must be the fully factored form. So negative 8 times 2t plus 1, t minus 1 is the factored form. How we doing? Who did I lose? What can I say? The dot by the what? Oh, the negative. That's a negative. There you go. So now, according to the zero product property, either -8 is 0, or 2t plus 1 is 0, or t minus 1 is 0. One of those three products, -8, 2t plus 1, or t minus 1, must be 0. I know -8 can't be. You can't have 0 equaling a negative number, or any number except 0, so that's out. Solve this one by subtracting 1 from both sides. So 2t is -1. Divide by 2. T is -½ And then over here, add 1 to both sides. T is equal to 1. So my answers are -½ or 1. How are we doing?
Oh wait, I got.
Not quite ready to pass the work out just yet. We're not done with this problem.
How did you check that out?
How would I check it out?
Yeah, how did you, where the check is? How did you do that?
Oh, I multiplied the inners, so
Which is 1.
which is 1t, and the outers, which is -2t. Add them together to get -t, which is what I wanted.
Where does -t is?
1t net minus 2t leaves -1t.
Now you do from that side.
Okay, then I take my two factors, my parentheses there, that I know now works.
2t and
2t plus 1, t minus 1. And I split it into the possible factors equaling 0. So the first factor, -8, could be 0. 2t plus 1 could be 0. And t minus 1 could be 0. Before I walk away from this problem, I have one last question to ask. Does it make sense for it to take -½ seconds to hit the ground?
Wait, I got 2t equals -1. That doesn't even equal 0.
You're right. Now go ahead and divide both sides by 2, and you'll have t equals -½ Does it make sense to have a negative answer to a question like this? No. So you, generally speaking, want to then look at your answers and say, what makes sense for the story? He's got 1 second in the air before he hits the water. Or at least according to this particular problem. Now, he's only jumping off a cliff that's 8 feet high. He's not exactly doing a huge cliff dive here. But it is what it is.